Good evening. My name is Chris Ham, and today I'm here to share with you a very unique and interesting story, that of athletes, their finances, and why such an unbelievable amount of them go broke. Before I start, I'd like to say that this is my dream job. I've always loved helping people. I've always had a knack for business. My aunt has always called me her little banker. Well, I guess I've grown up to a big banker now. And thirdly, I've always been an avid sports fan. So, now that that's out of the way, let me talk a little bit about the framework to guide our discussion. First, I'm going to be talking about the surge of revenue coming into the sports industry in the last 50 years. Then we'll move on to what I call the typical athlete, their background, some of the choices that they make that end up in this financial peril. And thirdly, let's look at what some of the athletes are doing right and really making this money last for not only their lifetime, but their children's, grandchildren's, great-grandchildren's as well. So looking at the surge of the financial industry, or the finances of sports, there's two important aspects of this. We have the franchise valuations, how much the franchises are worth, and then player salaries. I'd like to share a favorite example of mine. I might be a little bit biased, but about my good old Dallas Cowboys. In 1989, Jerry Jones bought the Cowboys for the hefty sum of $150 million. Today they're worth $2.1 billion. So a lot of people say that Jerry is a hell of a businessman. Well, I wish he could be a hell of a football manager as well, but that's a different story. Well, Jerry came in at the right time. I mean, some of his critics call him lucky, and I tend to think so as well. He got in at the perfect time, and he had some pretty good players to help him win those championships. I don't know if Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith, Michael Irvin, Deion Primetime Sanders, Daryl Moose Johnson, ring any bells. Obviously, you can tell I'm a fanatic. I can go on for days about my Cowboys. So as the teams were gaining all this value, mainly because of TV revenues, but that's a totally different speech, the player salaries were growing up as well. They could pay the players more money. In 1967, the average Major League salary was $19,000. To be fair, we'll adjust that for inflation. That's a little over $100,000 in 2012 purchasing power. But that's nowhere near the $3.2 million it is today. So with all of this money, these athletes are unable to manage all this money, obviously. So many of them are going broke. Over 60% of NFL athletes are broke after 5 years of retirement. So how does this happen? Well, it's important to take a look at their socioeconomic background. I feel like that's the main factor attributing to these failures. Their upbringing, their family structure, and their lack of education. These kids, they really are kids, are coming into $100 million. I know for myself, if I was in charge of managing a $100 million portfolio, I would have nowhere to start. They need some financial knowledge, and they definitely are lacking that. One great story that really put it in perspective for me, which is funny and shocking, is Rickey Henderson. He's the all-time base stealer in Major League Baseball. He was a highly recruited prospect, and he was signed by the Oakland A's, and he got $1 million signing bonus. Well, the A's called Rickey up about a month later after they signed him, and they go, "Rickey, is everything okay? We saw that your check hasn't cleared." And he was like, "Yeah, that's fine. I framed it." So, as crazy as that sounds, yes, Rickey Henderson framed a check. There's so many more stories of this. Players going to a check cashing service in their hometown to cash their first NFL check, or not even knowing how to open up a bank account. The second biggest problem I see with these athletes is the lack of internal controls. As a businessman, we always talk about this. As an accounting undergrad major, we were always talking about Sarbanes-Oxley and all this red tape and how important it is to have financial security. Well, these guys are doing the exact opposite. You can't have your best friend and your wingman be your agent, your financial planner, and your accountant. That's just a recipe for disaster. Also, these athletes have such a great level of competition. That's what makes them great athletes. But there's a downside to that as well. They're always trying to keep up with the Joneses, buying new cars, spending $50,000 on jewelry, and getting into gambling too. Gambling is a big problem with these athletes. Michael Jordan, a notorious gambler, his dad was asked about his gambling problem. He goes, Michael doesn't have a gambling addiction, he has a competition addiction. Some other guys that have lost tons of money betting, Floyd Mayweather, a boxer, John Daly's lost over $50 million, and Charles Barkley's lost over $10 million. And I guarantee you, he'd be the first one to say that, that's just terrible, Kenny. So with that gambling, there's also these investments. Like I said, they're always trying to keep up with the Joneses, and they want these sexy glamour investments. They want to open a car dealership or a nightclub, but they don't want to invest in a mutual fund. That's not sexy. The bad thing is that all these industries are such high risk, and only about 1 in 30 work out. To put the icing on the cake of all this, there's the big D, divorce. This really cripples athletes at the end of their career. One of my favorite teachers from my undergrad career, he was an accounting professor as well, he always told us, be careful who you marry. It's going to be the most important financial decision of your life. And these can be expensive. The same goes with these sports athletes. Over half of NFL athletes are divorced after 3 years of retiring, and they can be costly. Greg Norman, $100 million. Tiger, $100 million. Recently, Chris Humphries got in a little entanglement with Kardashian's sister. I'm not going to name any names here. But if I was his financial advisor, I would have looked at the historical trends and say, don't even think about touching those assets. So, there are all the problems with all the athletes, and you have a good idea about the environment. So, what are some other athletes doing right that actually perpetuate their wealth? Well, the main thing would be having a knowledgeable, accredited financial advisor, which is what I'm in the process of doing today. I had my undergraduate background in accounting and economics, and I'm working towards my MBA and eventually going to get my certified financial planning certificate as well as my CPA. Also, these athletes are making smart investment decisions and are listening to their financial advisors. What I'm going to do is have a 3-step financial process. This is accumulation, preservation, and perpetuation. They have no problem accumulating this wealth. The problem is preservation and perpetuation. Many of the athletes come into a New York skyscraper at JP Morgan with all these guys in 3-piece suits, and they're getting lectured at. That's not the way it should be done. These guys need to be taught, and it needs to be an open environment. I plan on having a very informal conversation with them, really getting to know their family, getting to know what they're about. Eventually, yes, you're going to have some hard financial conversations. I'm going to call this a financial boot camp. We need to show these athletes how they need to be serious about their investments. They need to be more serious than I am about them. I'm just some guy they're hiring, but this is actually their life. And in this stage, we really want to have the idea of perpetuation sink in, an idea that's bigger than oneself. I think it's really something special for the athletes' grandkids to go to college. So, as the sports industry continues to grow, and we have no doubt that it will, there are going to be various opportunities and challenges that are going to arise. I believe with this structure, we can change the tide for financial athletes and create a better environment for not only them, but our communities as well. Thank you and have a great day.
That's good.